Today's daf, we're going to be learning a Shevuot daf Kafeh. Today's daf is sponsored in honor of Ariel Bruce on her birthday, a wonderful daughter, wife, and mother of three beautiful, strong, sweet children. May this year bring you only happiness and peace to Kol Yisrael. All of our love, Saba Steve, and Safta Lisa. Today's daf is sponsored by Rebecca Darshan in memory of Helen Isaacs, her mother, on the occasion of her 25th year at site. She encouraged women's learning and especially loved learning in Jerusalem during the last 10 years of her life. Her life was too short in years, but full every day. And happy Yom Yerushalayim to everybody. And we are going to get started. So we ended yesterday. We were in the middle of a sugya. We just have to finish it up, which is the 6 reasons. We're up to the 6th one as to why this Mishnah in Kritut, according to what we explained before, should have mentioned this Shavua shelo ochal chelev, right? It should have had a Shvuah kolel. If Shvuah kolel, it really works, that you add on something that's permitted to some, in addition to something that's forbidden, then the shvuah should be effective. Then in this case of trying to come up with as many possible korbanot chatat, we could have. Why didn't it mention a case where there was also a shvuah associated with it? Besides that the chelev was forbidden, the person had said, I took an oath that I won't eat dates and chelev. And then the chelev would have been forbidden for a 5th reason, okay, or a 6th reason, right? There were 4 chataot, 1 asham, and it would have added an additional chatat offering. So each answer we brought basically said, well, the Tana wasn't interested in that case because Tana was only interested in cases that didn't include this. So Ravina Amar, we're at the top of our daf. Ki katani midi dechayel amidi debarachilahu. Shvuah dechayel amidi dela barachilahu lo katani. It was only talking about prohibitions that only relate to food. For example, right, you have chelev is food related isur. Yom Kippur, food, right? All these relate only to food, but an oath, which relates to food items and non-food items, you can take an oath about anything, right? You can take an oath, we'll see in a few minutes, that I won't sleep, okay? That has nothing to do with food. So therefore, it did mention an oath that related to food because oaths in general relate to other things besides food. They were talking about only 4 sin offerings that all have to do with food-related prohibitions. So the Gemara says that's not a good claim. V'harei hekdesh techal nami eitzim v'avanim. What do you mean? Hekdesh, I could say, right? It's not just food. Food does become hekdesh, but also non-food items can become hekdesh. Like I could say this wood is hekdesh. I could say these stones are hekdesh. Say it to anything. Okay, so let's fix Ravina a little bit. Elakikatane, you know what I'll ask? Actually, I see some issues with the internet. If people shut their videos, then that will also, I think, help the Zoom maybe work better on the internet. So I'll recommend that, and then that will help. Okay. So now they say, Elakikatane midi dechayel midi diipe mashasha. Oaths can actually work on something where there's ipe mashasha. Kikatani. The list was only relating to things that have mashash. Okay, they have they're tangible items. Shevuot chayla midi delay mashasha, but right. So isur chaylev, isur eating on Yom Kippur, but an oath can only apply to something that doesn't have any. And it can also apply, to something that doesn't have mashash to it. Okay, we're going to talk about this. Kigon she'eshan v'shelo eshan, and therefore lo katani. Since oaths, so it's not food related, because that hekdesh also isn't food related, or only exclusively food related, but it's the issue that is all related to tangible items. And this applies to even non-tangible items, and that's why it's not on the list. They wanted to apply to prohibitions that all relate to tangible things, like eating chelev, like impure person eating hekdesh. So maybe impurity is not exactly tangible, but the eating of it is actually, right, is. Okay. Anyway, shvuah is a category that can relate to non-tangible items, which is actually a really good lead into the next Mishnah. So now the Mishnah is going to, again, our topic right now is shvuat bitui, oaths of expression. So the question is, what oaths are expressive oaths? Echad dvarim shel atzmo ve'echad dvarim shel achirim. Can relate to your own things. It can relate to other people's oaths. Okay, the oaths don't have to be exclusively related to you. They can relate to other people. The Gemara is going to bring us examples, or even the Mishnah is going to bring us examples. Okay, now mamash, ein b'hem mamash, and yesh b'hem mamash, we're going to describe in 2 different ways. The Mishnah is going to bring 2 different examples. The classic is it's intangible, but we're going to see it's not just intangible, it's also meaningless. Okay, so you can have oaths of expression that apply both to intangible items and to things that are totally meaningless. Ketzad. So now let's talk about what is an oath that involves other people. Amar shvuah she'aten leish ploni v'shelo aten shenatati v'shelo natati. I take an oath that I will give somebody something, or I won't give somebody something, or I gave somebody something, or I didn't give somebody something. Those are our four possibilities, assuming we're with Rabbi Akiva. Also, oaths apply to the past, oaths of expression. So we now have the four possibilities, future and past, about I will or I won't give something, or I did or I didn't give something. So that's an oath that involves somebody else. She'eshan, now we're up to the doesn't have, is intangible. So she'eshan, she'ishan v'shelo ishan. I will sleep or I won't sleep. Or she'ashanti v'shelo yashanti, or I didn't sleep or I did sleep. Okay, those are four oaths of expression that have to do with something intangible. Sleeping is not tangible. There's no item to hold on to relate to it. She'ezrok tzur layam v'shelo ezrok. Now we get to the other interpretation of doesn't have mamash, which means it's not significant. I threw a rock into the sea. That's not, you might have thought, and we'll get to this in a minute in the Mishna, you might have thought lahara or lahetiv. The way that the Torah describes an oath of expression is, I will do something, to do something bad or do something good, right? Meaning, which really means to not do something or yes, do something. But it sounds like it has to have meaning to it. To do something good or bad means it has effect on something. Now, if I threw a rock in the sea, it's totally meaningless action. And yet, if I took an oath on it, the oath is going to be valid. Okay, so shezrok shrelayam, that I will throw a rock in the sea, shelo ezrok, that I won't, or shezarakti v'shelo zarakti, or I did or I didn't. Rabbi Yishmael omer, eno chayav ela tilavo. Okay, you would expect him to come up in this Mishna and say, what are you talking about? Half of the cases you brought were in the past. You're not liable an oath of expression for something that happened in the past. That's Rabbi Yishmael that we learned already, because la'ara uleitiv in the pasuk is only future, and therefore never mentions past tense in the pasuk. So therefore, oaths of expression don't apply. Shenemar, as we said, lahara or lehitiv, to do something bad or do something good, meaning to say I won't do something or I will do something, and that's the only cases included. Amar lo Rabbi Akiva, im ken, ein li ela dvarim sheyesh behem hara hatava. So according to you then, if you're going to take lahara or lehitiv so seriously, then you're going to say only things that have meaning to them, either to do good or to do bad. But as Rok Tzur Layam, you're not going to agree with either, right? He's going to say like this. Where do we get this issue of as Rok Tzur Layam, a totally meaningless, how do we know it's going to be an oath? Tvarim she'ein be'em hara tava minayin. Rabbi Akiva says, where do we get it from? So Rabbi Yishmael answers him, I'll tell you where we get it from. Amar lo me riboy hakatuv. Let's look at the pasuk again. O nefesh asher tishavali vatebes fatayim, a person who expresses with their lips, lehara o lehitiv, to do bad or to do good. We're in Vayikra chapter 5, verse 4. Here come the words liriboy, lechol asher yivateh ha'adam b'shvuah, anything that a person expresses with an oath. So now, what do you get from here? Oh, anything. It doesn't only have to be la ra'uletiv. So comes Rabbi Akiva and he throws it back to Rabbi Yishmael. You think l'chol asher yivateh adam b'shvuah comes to include even if I say I'm going to throw a rock in the sea, which is totally meaningless. Amar lo, im riba katuv l'kach. Once it says l'chol asher yishavah, it should include past tense also. And that's the end of Rabbi Akiva's comment to Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yishmael doesn't comment back. Okay, but Rabbi Yishmael obviously still stands with his opinion that it's only in future, not in the past. Okay, now we're going to start the Gemara on this section. The first thing we're going to do is bring a braita that compares vows to oaths relating to some of the issues we discussed here. And it's a classic Tannaitic source where it likes to say, oh, this one's more severe, stringent than that one because of this. And this one's more strict than that one because of that. And we're going to discuss the differences between neder and shvur. Now, the main differences between neder and shvur, or the reasons why there's differences, has to do with the fact that a neder, as we learned already, is an isur on chefza, as we call it. It's a prohibition on an object. And a shvuah is an isur gavra. It's a prohibition on a person. A shvuah is saying, I take an oath, I will not do something, generally. And a neder is This is forbidden. This object is forbidden to me. And that affects all sorts of things. So Tanu Rabbanan, we're going to quote a Braita. Chomer b'nidarim mi b'shvuot and chomer b'shvuot mi. Each one has a stringency the other one doesn't have. Chomer b'nidarim, shanidarim chalim al dvar mitzvah k'dvar reshut. A neder can apply to a mitzvah as well. I can make a neder that all sukkahs are forbidden to me. And then with that, I won't be able to do the mitzvah. Now, I can't make an oath that I'm not going to sit in the sukkah because that goes against what the Torah says. And I was already sworn in at the Torah to yes, sit in the sukkah. I now can't say I'm not going to sit in the sukkah. But I can forbid sukkahs to me because the sukkah, if I forbid sukkahs to me, it's true that indirectly I will not be able to sit in a sukkah, but it's indirect. I'm basically saying sukkahs are forbidden to me. There's nothing in the Torah that says I can't do that. Right? So I can do that. It's just in the end, I won't be able to fulfill the mitzvah. חומר בשבועות, שהשבועות חלות לדבר שאין בו ממש, כדבר שיש בו ממש, מה שאין כבנדרים. You can't take a neder on sleep. You can't say, konam sleep to me. Okay? Right? Sleep will be forbidden to me in a vow because sleep is not tangible. If neder is an isur chefza on the object, so it has to be on an object that's tangible. I can't do it on sleep. Okay, there is a way you could do it. You could say, konam einai b'shena. Okay, my eyes to fall asleep will be forbidden because then it's falling on your eyes, falling asleep. It's interesting to think about that. They say that your eyes closing is falling asleep. Anyway, that's a whole different thing, but that's the only way to do it. But you can't really do it on something. It has to be on something tangible. Now we're going to go to two cases in the Mishnah, and then we're going to get to the real body of today's sugya. Ketzad, Amar Shvuah she'aten leploni v'shelo aten. So here's a very side question, which is, it says, I will give something to someone. I take an oath about that. What kind of giving to who? What am I giving them? And to who am I giving it? My aten, if you're saying, I take an oath that I'm going to give charity to someone, I'm already commanded by Torah law to do that, and we already learned, Ein shvuah halal shvuah. If I already took an oath, I can't take another oath. There's no validity to that second oath. So if I take a pledge and I take an oath, I will give charity to someone. Now, I'm obligated to give charity because I'm obligated to give charity, but I'm not obligated because of my oath. If I forget and don't give the money, I'm not obligated a korban or leviyored because that's not an oath. How do we know it says it in the Torah? Shenemar naton titen lo. Okay, it's in Dvarim Tevav, because you have to give charity to a poor person. Ella, it must be matana la'ashir. You must be saying, I'm taking an oath that I'm giving a gift to someone who's not poor. Okay, and then it's just some sort of a gift that I pledge in an oath that I'm going to give. And then if I don't fulfill it, if I don't fulfill it unwittingly, that's what the case of Shevuot bitui is, I forget. Remember the pasuk says, okay, we read before, we read up until that point. The next words were, right? Then I forget. And then, okay, remember, because we're going to come back to the end of this pasuk also later, I forget. And then I find out that I forgot that I had taken this oath. And then I'm guilty for one of these. We're going to darshan this one of these later as well. Okay. Another side question. She'ishan v'shelo ishan. Wait, if I take an oath that I'm going to sleep or not going to sleep, and particularly the one that's going to bother us is that I'm not going to sleep. I take an oath that I'm not going to sleep. And then I go to sleep, right? Okay, because at a certain point you have to sleep. So if at some point I go to sleep, I've gone against the oath, and I'll have to bring the sacrifice. But wait, Rabbi Yochanan, Homer Shvuah shelo ishan shlosha yamin, malkino tov yashen la'altir. If I take an oath that I won't sleep for 3 days, okay, Rabbi Yochanan understood a person is not capable of not sleeping for 3 days. 3 days is the outer limit of how far you could go without sleeping. So if you take an oath that I will not sleep for 3 days, I wanted to check with my daughter. I seem to remember in the Shomer Chomot operation, she didn't sleep for 3 days straight, okay, or almost 3 days. So I don't know, maybe she took a nap in there somewhere. I have to check. But basically, theoretically, you could go for 3 days without sleeping, but not more than 3 days. So if I take an oath that I'm not going to sleep for 3 days, since it's not humanly possible, that is what we call a shvuat shav. It's not an oath at all. And your oath is invalid, okay? And therefore, malkinoto, you get lashes for saying a shvuat shav, okay? A totally useless, an oath in vain. And yashem la'altir, your oath is not valid. And you can go to sleep whenever you want because it's not a valid oath. So how can the Mishnah say that you could take an oath that I won't sleep when we know that you can't take an oath that you won't sleep for more than 3 days? That's not an oath. So hatam damar shlosha, hacha de lo amar shlosha. So they're saying, the Shevuot shelo Hashan in the Mishnah must be less than 3 days. Okay, if it's for I won't sleep for 3 days, already that's a Shevuot shav, and that won't be an oath of expression. And it won't be a valid oath at all. You'll get lashes for having said a bad oath, an oath in vain, but you won't get lashes for not keeping to your oath. But our Mishnah was talking about that you said you won't sleep for less than that amount of time, and therefore it's a valid oath. Now we get to the main part of our sukka, which is going to take us through the end of today's daf. This big machlok at Rav and Shmuel. Those are the words in the Mishnah. So I'm going to take an oath that I will throw a rock in the sea, or that I won't throw a rock in the sea. Itmar. Now here comes the machloket. If I take an oath that somebody else threw a rock into the ocean, okay, or into the sea. So I took an oath about you, and I say, yesterday I saw you throw it, right? I swear yesterday you threw a rock into the sea. Or I swear, someone maybe claims you threw a rock in yesterday, and I say, I take an oath that you did not. And it's about you, not about me. Now, theoretically, I could do that, right? Because even just like we said before, I could talk about other people. I could say I will give something to someone, or I gave something to someone. I could also theoretically take an oath about something you did, okay? Because I could have seen it, not seen it. I could take an oath about you, but only in the past. I can't take an oath like that in the future. I can't say, okay, and this is very important to understand. I can't take an oath that I can control it happening about the future. So if I take an oath, I swear I won't sleep for 2 days, I can take that oath because I can control whether or not I sleep for 2 days or not. It's in my control. Now, maybe you say it could be out of my control, but let's say it's in my control. But if I say I take an oath you won't sleep, I have no control over whether you're going to sleep or not. I can't take an oath about that. So Rav says, if I take a shvuah, that's fine oath, because I can take an oath about what happened relating to you yesterday. Totally fine. But Shmuel says, patur. Shmuel says, I'm not liable if I take an oath that you threw a rock yesterday and you didn't throw a rock yesterday, I won't bring a korban. Why not? Well, Rav Amar Chayav, because it has all the criteria, according to Rav, of an oath. What needs to make an oath an oath? We talked about this yesterday, I believe it was, and it's going to come up in the Mishnah on Daf Kaf Zayin. I think I said it was going to come up on the Mishnah here. It's not in the Mishnah here, it's in the Gemara here, but it comes up in the Mishnah on Daf Kaf Zayin, that in order for an oath to be an oath, because it says Laharau Leitiv, when I take the oath, and this is very important to understand for today, because we're going to talk about this a lot, it has to be that I can word it both in the positive and the negative. Okay, so this oath, can it be worded in the positive and the negative? Yeah, I can say, I took an oath that you threw it yesterday, or I can take an oath that you didn't throw it yesterday. That's lav v'hein. Okay, I can do that. Shmuel Amar Patul, delete bilahaba. He adds another criteria. Not just, now remember, the oath from the Torah is on future, not on past. And then we had a drasha other than Rabbi Yishmael who didn't have that. But Rabbi Yishmael said, what do you mean? It said, any kind of oath of expression, which would even apply to the past. So we have this situation where you can do oaths also about the past, not only about the future. And from the Torah, we learn laharau leitiv, it has to go both lav and hain. Comes Shmuel and adds, if you're going to already say that there's oaths about the past, well, they have to be oaths that can be worded in the future. Besides saying if you word in the positive, it has to also be worded in the negative. Or if you word in the negative, it has to also potentially be worded in the positive. If you take an oath in the past, it has to be able to be potentially worded in the future. Now, this oath, I cannot word in the future tense. I can't say I'm taking an oath that you're going to throw a rock in the sea tomorrow, because that's something that's totally beyond my control. I can't take an oath about something you're going to do tomorrow. So therefore, Shmuel says this isn't an oath of expression, because about something in the past, theoretically, I could say, and it's lav v'hein, it is positive and negative can be worded, but it can't be worded in the future. Now, Rav doesn't have this criteria that has to be worded in the future, and Shmuel does. That's the big machloket between them. So now we're going to suggest the first thing we're going to do is, Okay, the structure for the next two parts of the daf are, we're going to try two Tannaitic debates and connect this machlok of Rav and Shmuel and say, oh, they're arguing about things that Tannaim before them argued about. That's the first part, where we're going to try these two attempts and reject them both. The second part, we're going to raise two difficulties with Shmuel and resolve them. And then we're going to go to the third part, but we'll get to that when we get there. So, and the third is the last part of today's daf. So first, let's start. Lema beplukta de Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Akiva kami palge. Let's suggest that their machloket is based on the machloket about Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva about past and future, right? They're the same. They're the other people who argued about this past and future. Well, it's not exactly the same, but they try to suggest that maybe it's the same. It's not, as it says in our Mishna. We already read this, but we'll go through it again quickly. Rabbi Yishmael omer, Eino chayav el atid lavo. You're only liable for future vows. Shenemar lahara uleiti, because it says to either do bad or to do good in the future. Amar lo Rabbi Akiva im ken ein li dvarim sheyesh b'hem hara v'atava. Sounds like only things that have meaning to that. Dvarim she'ein b'hem hara v'atava, that are just meaningless things. Minayin, like I threw something in the water or I will throw something. Amar lo mi riboya katuf. So Yishmael says, yeah, that we get because it says l'chol ha'shei v'tei adam. Amar lo riba katuv l'kach. So Rabbi Akiva said, if it includes that, it should include also the past. So now, how do we connect this machloket? We say Rav, who says it doesn't need to be something that could also be worded in the future, would say ki Rabbi Akiva, because Rabbi Akiva says you can do vows in the past just like you can do vows in the future, and vows in the past are fine. They don't need to be also worded in the future tense, potentially. Ushmuel da'amar ki Rabbi Yishmael, and Shmuel who says a vow in the past doesn't work unless it can be worded in the future. Now, this is a little bit tricky, but we'll say he holds like Rabbi Yishmael that there aren't vows you're not liable for vows in the past. So now they say, I'll leave it to Rabbi Yishmael, kuli amalo plike. Okay, neither one goes with Rabbi Yishmael. That's pretty clear because in the end, Shmuel holds you are liable for vows in the past only if they can also potentially be worded in the future tense. So nobody holds like Rabbi Yishmael. Hashta milta. Now this is why, because hashta milta di ite belahabalo machayav ale Rabbi Yishmael l'shaval. If there's something that theoretically could, I want to say about the past, like lo achalti, I didn't eat yesterday. According to Rabbi Yishmael, that doesn't work, even though I could word it, right? Even though, right, ite de lahaba, I could word it in the future. I could say, I won't eat tomorrow. That works. And yet, Rabbi Yishmael doesn't obligate you for that kind of oath in the past because he doesn't think there's anything of oaths in the past. So milta delay to balahaba mebaye. So why is there even a debate about if I did something in the past, if it could be worded in the future, does it have to be able to be worded in the future? What do you mean? There is no Shevuot of the past for Rabbi Yishmael. So that's clear. So neither one accords with Rabbi Yishmael. Ki plige aliba de Rabbi Akiva. Their machloket is within Rabbi Akiva, though. And then, obviously, it's not the same Tannaitic debate. Now, what's the machloket within Rabbi Akiva? Well, Rav ki Rabbi Akiva. Rav is simply like Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva said, you'll be liable for vows in the past. And Rav says you're liable for vows in the past, even if they can't potentially be worded in the future. But Shmuel amal, ad kan lo mechayev Rabbi Akiva hatam l'shaval. Ela milta di'ita b'lahaba. Mechayev Rabbi Akiva l'shaval. Milta delete b'lahaba lo. When Rabbi Akiva is mechayev on past vows, comes Shmuel and says, it's not all past vows. Rabbi Akiva didn't say, any vow of expression in the past works as well. Rabbi Akiva said, like I said, that's what Shmuel is going to claim. When Rabbi Akiva said vows in the past are going to be applicable, is only if they can be potentially worded in the future. If they can't be potentially worded in the future, like I threw it, right, my friend threw it yesterday, I take an oath like that. Well, I can't say I take an oath my friend is going to throw it tomorrow. Because of that, Shmuel will say, even Rabbi Akiva agrees with me. We don't know what Rabbi Akiva said. But each one claims that within Rabbi Akiva, which makes sense, right? All Rabbi Akiva said was there's vows of the past. He didn't define what are criteria for vows in the past. We know obviously lav and hain, because that we already learned from lahara uleiti. But who's to say vows in the future, right? Does it need to be able to be potentially worded in the future? And that's the machlok. Okay, so that didn't work because they really both argue within Rabbi Akiva. Second option, and now we'll move to Amud Bet. Lema beplukta to Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera v'Rabbanan kamiflage. Maybe they're arguing over this machloket. The Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera and the rabbis debated. Now it'll take us a little while to understand the whole machloket. So let's read. Ditnan. It says in the Mishna on Daf Kaf Zayin, Nishba levatel et hamitzvah v'lo bitel patur. I take an oath to not do a mitzvah. Okay, I say I'm not going to sit in the sukkah. V'lo bitel, and then I actually sat in the sukkah. So I went against my oath, but I did the mitzvah, right? Patur, I'm exempt. Why am I exempt? Because an oath to not do a mitzvah is not a valid oath. We learned that already, because I'm already commanded to sit in the sukkah, so I can't take an oath to not sit in the sukkah. L'kayem et mitzvah v'lo kiyem patur. Again, if I say I'm going to do a mitzvah, I take an oath I'm going to sit in the sukkah, and I don't sit in the sukkah. Now, it's a problem because I didn't sit in the sukkah, but it's not a problem of the oath because I'm already commanded from Har Sinai to sit in the sukkah, so my oath doesn't apply. Shaya bedin she'eh chayav k'divrei Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera. But now they say you might have thought I'd be liable because of what Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera says. Now, Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera is going to have a different approach, and he's going to say, to Amar Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, Umayim harishut she'no mushba aleh mehar Sinai harei hu chayav aleh. I take an oath I'm going to eat tomorrow. Now, I'm not commanded to eat every day. Okay? I don't have to eat. So if I take an oath I'm going to eat, which is dvar reshut, it's permissible, right? It's not optional, you would say. I'm not commanded by the Torah. And if I don't do it, I'm obligated. Well, then logic would state, mitzvah shemushba aleh mehar Sinai eino din she'eh chayav aleh. Wouldn't you think we take a mitzvah more seriously? A mitzvah which I'm commanded to do, and then I take an oath that I'm going to do it, and I don't do it. Shouldn't I all the more so be obligated? Because besides that I took an oath to do it, the Torah also encourages me to do it. So all the more so, my not doing it is worse, right? If I don't eat when I promised when I took an oath that I would eat, okay, who cares if I eat or not, right? So I just have this oath. But if I'm commanded by the Torah, wouldn't you think I'd be doubly obligated to do it, both because the Torah commanded me and because I took the oath? So he has a different approach and thinks if I take an oath to do the mitzvah and I don't do it, I'm actually obligated to Shevuot bitui. Amru lo. They said no, because im amarta b'Shevuot harishut sheken asa balav kehen, tomar b'Shevuot mitzvah sheken lo asa balav kehen. So the rabbis give him a very technical answer, and they say the Shevuot is not a Shevuot bitui at all to say I will do a mitzvah. Why? Because if I say I take an oath, I'm going to sit in the sukkah, I can't do that mitzvah. I can't do that oath in the negative. Remember, it's all about can I say it can I word it in the positive and the negative. So since I can't say I take an oath not to sit in the sukkah because that goes against the Torah and that I'm not allowed to do, and therefore that oath is totally invalid. That means that an oath to yes do a mitzvah, since potentially it can't be worded in the negative, it's not an oath at all. So now what we see here is the machloket. Right, so I think I didn't finish the sentence, but in Mamarta, B'Shvuat Reshut can asabalav kehen. In Shvuat Reshut, I can say it in the positive and the negative. I could say I will eat tomorrow. I can also say I won't eat tomorrow. But Tomar B'Shvuat Mitzvah Sheken Lo Asabalav Kehen. How could I say it in Shvuat Mitzvah when I can't word it in the negative? Okay, so now, according to this, let's just be very clear because it's going to be a little tricky what they do here. But we have a machloka, Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera and the rabbis. Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera doesn't care about the lav v'hein. He doesn't think that you need to be able to word it in the positive and the negative, otherwise he wouldn't have said what he said. He thinks a shvuot to do a mitzvah is actually a shvuot bitui, and you'd have to bring a korban if you didn't do it. Because he says, logic would state this is more important to keep than reshut, than something that's completely optional. But the real thing he's saying is, I don't care if you can't word it in the negative. It doesn't matter. You don't need this lav kehain thing. This thing we're going to learn in the Mishna, Daf Kaf Zayin, is not his opinion. He doesn't think that it needs to be worded in the positive and negative. He doesn't go by this drashav lahara uleitiv. It has to be able to be worded in both directions. So now let's take it to our machloket. What's our machloket? Our machloket is if you do a past vow, right, an oath about the past, does it have to have the criteria that it can be worded in the future? And these are two completely different debates. One is about positive and negative formulation, and one is about past and future, right? If I do a past one, does it have to be able to be worded in the future? What the Gemara is going to do is connect them. And they're going to say, Rav da Amar ke Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera and Shmuel da Amar ke Rabbanan. Rav is going to say, if you don't need, if Rabbi Yehuda, I'm going to hold like Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, you don't need lav v'hain, and therefore you also don't need it to be able to be worded in the future, as if these things go together. There's a bit of a problem with this because if you look back at Rav, Rav's wording was the reason why, okay, if you start from the very beginning, Shvuah shezarak ploni layam v'shelo zarak, Rav says you're obligated. Why? De'ite belav v'hein. Because it can be worded positive and negative. I threw it, so-and-so threw it yesterday, so-and-so didn't throw it yesterday. So he clearly does have the lav v'hein. But they're going to suggest right now that you don't need lav v'hain, and therefore, if I go with Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, Rav says I don't need lav v'hain, and therefore I also don't need it to be able to be worded in the future. Okay, the reason why these two go together is just because the issue is, can I say something like this if I can't word it in a different possible formulation? One is positive, negative, and one is past, future, but as if they're one and the same. In a minute, we're going to reject this, and that's why it doesn't bother me that Rav himself said you need lav v'hain, because the Gemara is going to reject this possibility anyway. Ushmuel de Amar ki Rabbanan. And Shmuel holds like the rabbis who say you need lav v'hain, and therefore you also need past and future. But now they're going to say, I'll leave it to Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera kol amalo pligi. Nobody agrees with Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera. Everybody thinks you need lav v'hain, as I just showed you, in the previous stuff a minute ago, I just showed you where he says lav v'hain. Hashta lav v'hain lo bai lahaba lusha avar bai. And basically what they're saying is, according to Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, everyone thinks that if you put on the glasses of Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera and you take his opinion, if you don't need lav v'hain, you for sure don't need it to be able to be formulated in the future. Okay, for sure. Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera wouldn't think that. But but you could say that Rav and Shmuel disagree with how to understand the rabbi's position. And then the whole question is going to be, I'll just say it very simply. If you require lav v'hain, does it mean you also require future, that it be able to be worded in the future, or are those two things totally unconnected? So that's what we're going to say. Shmuel k'Rabbanan. Shmuel holds like the rabbis. You need lav v'hain. You also need, if I do it in the past, it has to be able to be worded in the future. So just like if I say a formulation, it has to be able to be said in the opposite formulation, positive or negative, or whatever I was doing, it has to be the reverse. Also, past, it has to be something that I could theoretically word in the future, and it would be an oath. But Rav says, Kilo M'chai Rabbanan, but lav v'hain. Lav v'hain is different from past and future. Why? Because lav v'hain is learned out directly from the pasuk. Dichtiv lahara ulehitiv behedya. Okay, that says it explicitly in the verse. To do bad or to do good, which means it's both, right? Yes and no. It has to be positive formulation and negative formulation. Now, where do we get this whole past case? The whole fact that we even are chayav, according to Rabbi Akiva, for past vows is from a drasha l'chol sheyivatei adam b'shvuah. It's a very general pasuk which just includes that case. So because it's miribuye dekra'atu b'chayve. So because it's from this general pasuk, that general pasuk just includes all the cases. There's no limitation in that pasuk. It's a very general. Anything else you say, and then anything else would be, yeah, I could word it in the past, even though it can't theoretically be worded in the future. So the attempts to say they had a machloket tanaim is not the case. So still, Rav and Shmuel have this debate. It's just not grounded in some machloket tanaim. Now we have the two difficulties against Shmuel. Mativ Rav Hamnuna. In both cases, we're going to have somebody, Rav Hamnuna in the first, Rav in the second, who raises a difficulty against Shmuel, and then the Gemara is going to say, "Hu motiv la, hu mefarek la." He brought the difficulty, and he resolved it also. Okay, so sometimes, right, someone brings a difficulty, and someone else answers it, or the Stam of the Gemara answers it. In our case, the person who brought it is going to answer the question himself. Here comes our source. Lo achalti hayom v'lo hinachti tefillin hayom. I get up and I say, or a man gets up and says, I didn't eat today, or I didn't put on tefillin today. Mashbiachani, and then you're standing there and you say, are you willing to take an oath about that? V'amar amen. And the person said, yes, I am. Now, when they say amen, they basically have taken the oath. Okay, even though they didn't use the language of the oath, but they took an oath. Chayav, if they in fact ate or put on tefillin, they're liable for the oath. Okay, bishlama, according to Shmuel, lo achalti ite b'lo ochal. You need it to be able to be worded in the future. So let's see. I didn't eat. I won't eat. That works. Ella lo hinachti mi'ita b'lo eniach. A man can't get up and say, I didn't put on tefillin because there's no option to say, I won't put on tefillin tomorrow. I take an oath I won't put on tefillin. You can't make an oath that goes against the Torah. So that seems to knock out Shmuel's approach. But like I said, hu motiv lav hu he answered it. Let's dadin katane. Now, when we say it's not part of this pasuk about oath because it can't be done in the future, what's the pasuk talking about? The pasuk's talking about a case of shgaga, remember? Ne'elam mimenu, you forget. And then you remember that, you forgot you took the oath the next day, you went against your oath, and you then have to bring a korban. So they say, la chalti le korban. Okay, litzdadim katani means we brought two cases, but really each one has its own track. When he said your lot, when this Tanaitic source said that, I think it might be a Mishna, I forget, but this source says, I will not wear tefillin, okay? And then, so in the part about the food, I didn't eat yesterday. So that if I go against my vow, I would have to bring a korban because does exist in the future tense. But lohinachti lamalkot. If I say I didn't put on tefillin yesterday and I actually did, and I did it intentionally. I knew I put on tefillin, but I said I didn't put on tefillin today. Then I'm going to be liable for lashes because that's mazy. That's not talked about in this pasuk. This pasuk is specifically talking about the oath when in a case where I forget and I have to then bring a korban. That's what the pasuk is talking about. And in that case, you won't be liable of korban if I forgot. But if I intentionally went against my vow, of course I'm liable. I get lashes for saying a vow that was a total lie. I'm going to get lashes for that. So therefore, that source doesn't create a problem for Shmuel. Mativ Rava. Rava raises another difficulty. Ezo hi shvuat shav. Okay, this is a Mishna we saw. What's a shvuat shav? It also comes up later. Ezo shvuat shav. נשבע לשנות את הידוע לאדם, ואמר על עמוד של אבן שהוא של זהב. Okay, I take an oath, shvuat shav, totally meaningless oath. I say this pillar of stone is actually gold. Okay, I don't say it's pillar of stone. I just say this pillar is gold when it's clearly stone. So now they say, va'amar ula behu shenikar l'shnei b'nei adam, l'shlosha b'nei adam. Ula says, it's only if it's clear to three people that pillar was gold, was stone. Okay. And I claimed it was gold in my oath. Okay. So now what do we infer from Ula? Tama de nikar. Only if it was known. Halo nikar. What if it wasn't nikar? Then over mishum shvuat bitui. Now what he's assuming is like this. That's what we call a shvuat shav. That's not a shvuat bitui. That's a shvuat shav. I took an oath about something totally incorrect. Okay. That everybody knew was incorrect. But what if they didn't all know it was incorrect? What if nobody knew if it was gold or stone? Okay, maybe it's a bad example, but let's say it was a meaningless oath because it was wrong, but nobody knew it was wrong. It wasn't popular. Nobody knew what it was made of. And I took an oath. I knew, but I was lying about it. Okay, would I be liable? So we said, it sounds like I won't be liable for Shvuat Shav, but I will be liable for something. What must that be? Shvuat bitui. Now, what do you see here? What's the problem? Amai. Ha'ino b'yeheshel zahav. I can't testify about, take an oath about a pillar and say, I swear this pillar will be gold. There's no such thing. It doesn't change a pillar. Okay. So that seems to go against Shmuel because I will be liable to Shvuat bitui. If nobody else knew what it was made out of, and I lied, I will be, even though it doesn't exist in the future. So this is a pretty easy answer. Who says the inference is if it's not a shvuat shav, it's a shvuat bitui? You could say nikar over mishum shvuat shav. If everyone knew, three people knew, that means everyone would know. Basically, it would be a shvuat shav. Lo nikar over mishum shvuat sheker. If it's not, then you'll be because you lied. Okay, that's just something else. That's a lie. That's not a shvuat bitui, and therefore it's not a problem for Shmuel because it's not a shvuat bitui. So you don't need the lahaba, right? The fact that it could be potentially in the future is only Shmuel. Okay, now we get to the third section about this Rav and Shmuel machloket, and it starts with the statement of Abai, and at the very end we'll get back to the statement of Abai. We'll raise a difficulty with it. We're going to have a contradiction between Abai says somewhere and what Abai says somewhere else, and we'll end with resolving that. Amar Abai, umode Rav. ואומר לחברו שבועה שאני יודע לך עדות, ואשתכח דלא יד עלי דפטור. Rav says, let's go back to Rav. Rav says if I word something in the past, doesn't have to be something that could be potentially worded in the future. Either which way we're going to consider it Shevuot bitui. However, if I say, Shevuot she'ani yodea l'cha edut, I swear I know testimony for you, and I'm lying, okay? I don't. It turns out I don't know. I'll be exempt. Why? Well, ho'il v'leite bichlal she'eni yodea l'cha edut. In this case, Rav will say, well, since you can't say it in the negative formulation, remember, we said that Rav requires lav v'hein. I can't say I take an oath, I don't know testimony for you. Now I can, but it's not a Shevuot bitui. Why isn't it? It's a Shevuot ha'edut. That's the other pasuk in this section in Vayikra where it says, if you know who aid o yada o ra'ah, right? I know testimony for someone and I claim, I take an oath and I say, I don't know testimony for you. Then it's called the Shevuot ha'edut. So it's not a Shevuot bitui. So now, even though potentially I could say an oath, I will not. It could be formulated in the negative. But when I formulate it in the negative formulation, it's not a Shevuot bitui. It's not an oath of expression. It's an oath of edut. That's some other category. So therefore, Rav will say in that case, if I say I know edut, since the negative formulation of that falls into a totally different category, that's not an oath of expression I'm going to be liable for. So if I say, I swear I know testimony for you, I'll come to court and I'll testify and I swear. And then I don't know testimony. So it's not, I don't bring an ola b'yored. But if I say, yadati v'lo yadati, I knew testimony for you or didn't know testimony for you, or he'adati v'lo he'adati, or I testified for you or I didn't testify for you and I lied, both of those cases is a machloket. That's the classic machloket, Rav and Shmuel. Why is it the classic machloket? Because both those cases I can't say, just like I can't say you'll throw something in the river tomorrow, right? I also can't say I will testify tomorrow, or I will know testimony for you tomorrow. Who knows if I will know testimony for you tomorrow? How do I know that? It's not in my control. Okay, and whether or not I testify for you or don't testify for you tomorrow is not in my control. So those cases will be a machloket because they can't be worded in the positive. The assumption is when I say I'll testify for you, I don't even know right? Like, it's not like I know testimony right now and I'm swearing I'll testify for you, right? It's saying I will know something and I will testify for you. Who knows if I will know something for you and testify for you? Okay, let's leave that statement on the side right now. The main thing for us is the first line because we're going to come back to that. That Rav agrees that if I say I do know testimony, that's not an oath because I don't know testimony will be a Shevuot ha'edut, not a Shevuot bitui. Okay, we'll see where we're going to get there soon. Bishlam al Shmuel de Amar milti delete balahaba lo machayav alei l'sha'avar lehachi afka rachman l'Shevuot ha'edut michlal Shevuot bitui. Now we have to figure out why Shevuot ha'edut isn't just under Shevuot bitui. Because what Shevuot ha'edut, we just explained, it's kind of like a Shevuot bitui. It's just the Torah called it something else, a Shevuot ha'edut. Because it's basically me taking an oath about something that I'm lying about, right? I say I don't know testimony and I actually do, okay? So according to Shmuel, well, what's Shevuot ha'edut? It's on the past. And it can't be worded in the future because I don't know if I will know testimony for you in the future. I can't take an oath about that. So Shmuel makes perfect sense why the Torah has Shevuot ha'edut and Shevuot bitui. Because according to Shmuel, this isn't a Shevuot ha'edut at all. I'm sorry, this isn't a Shevuot bitui. Shevuot bitui has to have the potential to be said in the future. I can't make an oath like that in the future. So that's number one. But Ella Rav l'mayil ta'avke rachmana. So according to Rav, why would there be something called a Shevuot ha'edut? Why wouldn't it just be a Shevuot bitui? According to Rav, it doesn't need to be able to be worded potentially in the future, so it should be a valid Shevuot bitui. Why does Torah need to call it a Shevuot ha'edut? So Amrua Rabbanan kamed Abai. The rabbis in the school of Abai said, l'chiyuve alei tarte. Say something interesting. It is a Shevuot bitui, and it's also a Shevuot ha'edut, and you actually have to bring two korbanot. If I lie and say, I didn't know testimony for you, and I really did, I'll have to do a Shevuot bitui and a Shevuot ha'edut. And assuming it was shkaga. Okay, we're going to get into the shkaga issue because you might remember Shevuot ha'edut is mezid and Shevuot bitui is only shkaga, ne'elam mimenu. So you'd have to have done it b'shkaga. Amar lehu, so Abaye says, no way you chayav two. Tarte lo mitzitu amritu. You can't say you're chayav twice. Titania, remember I told you pay attention? The end of that pasuk said, le'achat me'ela. You're chayav for one of these. The drasha is in the Braita, and comes by and says, this proves you can't be chayav two korbanot, because it says, you can only be liable one korban, not two. So therefore, there's no way you're chayav too. Okay, so now we have to ask the question to Abai. So if it's not to say there's also Shevuot bitui, also Shevuot edut, and you're chayav two korbanot, then why the Torah calls the Shevuot edut when it could have been called Shevuot bitui? Well, l'chiditanya. Now we get to the shkaga and the mezid. Well, b'kulam ne'emar ne'elam, v'kan lo ne'emar v'ne'elam. The only one it doesn't say ne'elam, it's shkaga for the korban olav yored in that section of Vayikra, is the Shevuot edut. It's the only one you're chayav b'mezid. So therefore, it had to separate it to say you're also liable if you did it intentionally, right? L'chayev ala mezid kishogeg. And that's why there's something called the Shevuot edut. Shevuot bitui, you're only liable if I forgot that I ate yesterday when I took the oath, right? I thought I didn't eat and I forgot, or I said I was not going to eat tomorrow and then I forget tomorrow and I eat. But in Shevuot edut, it's even if I did it mezid. If I knew the testimony and I lied under oath, I have to bring the korban. So then they say, they're still stuck on this two korbanot. Maybe the drasha about one is, well, you're only chayav one if you did it intentionally because you're only chayav Shevuot edut. But if you did it accidentally, maybe you'd be chayav two. To which he says, no, that can't possibly be. Didn't I tell you the drasha here with the students? What? Didn't you get it? Didn't I tell you didn't I tell you there's a drasha that says you only chayav one and not two? Now, let's think about it very obviously. Even mezid, if it's mezid and it's only Shevuot edut because you did intentionally and there's no Shevuot bitui, you wouldn't need a drasha to tell you you're only chayav one because mi katarte. Who would even think you're chayav two? And therefore, the drasha must be in a case where you think you're chayav two, which is a case where you were accidental, and maybe you'd say you're also chayav mishum Shevuot bitui. You're not chayav mishum Shevuot bitui. Now, Rava comes and asks gives a different answer why you're not chayav two. Rava amar mishum dahave davar shebichlal v'yatza lidom b'davar chadash en lechabo el chidusho bilvad. He says, Shevuot edut. Okay, I take an oath that I don't know testimony. Theoretically, it should have been part of Shevuot bitui, but okay, now here we get to the words. Davar shebichlal, it was part of Shevuot bitui. V'yatza lidom b'davar chadash, but the Torah said, oh no, we're going to call this something else. We're going to call it Shevuot edut. En lechabo el chidusho bilvad. According to this principle, it's only now Shevuot edut. It doesn't have Shevuot bitui. So let me just summarize, and this will lead us to the very last part of the daf. We have two approaches here. Rava says it's completely in the Shevuot edut world. It doesn't apply to the Shevuot bitui world at all because the Torah took it out of the general Shevuot bitui, and it's not called a Shevuot bitui at all. And that's why you're chayav one and not two. Abaye says it's in Shevuot bitui. It is. It's just that you're chayav mishum Shevuot edut, and you don't bring the korban of Shevuot bitui. But theoretically, it is a Shevuot bitui, and it didn't leave completely. Okay. So now they're going to ask, Michlal de Abaye Savar itul Shevuot b'olam. It sounds like Abaye is saying it is a Shevuot bitui. Now, why would this be relevant? Well, there's some cases where Shevuot edut isn't relevant. Let's say me, I'm a woman. Women's testimony in general is not accepted. So if I come and lie under oath that I don't know testimony for you, since I couldn't anyway testify about that in court, they wouldn't accept my testimony, it's not Shevuot edut. So what is it? It's Shevuot bitui. Okay? So Shevuot bitui, it still is a Shevuot bitui. Now, here we go back to our first statement, and we'll finish up with this. Hamar Abaye modeh b'rav omer lechavero shvuah sheni yodeh l'chayidut v'ishtakafte lo yada alei depater ho'il v'leite be'eni yodeh l'chayidut. How did we start the section? We said that Abaye says that Rav would agree that if there's a Shevuot, I say I know testimony, that's not a Shevuot bitui because I can't formulate that in the negative. It's not a Shevuot bitui. What do you mean it's not Shevuot bitui? It is a Shevuot bitui. You're just not going to be liable for it, and there might be cases where you are liable. If it's a woman saying it, that is a Shevuot bitui. So theoretically, it is belav v'hein according to Abaye. So Abaye contradicts himself because the fact that he thinks that Shevuot edut is also a Shevuot bitui, that there is an overlap between them, then the statement of Rav that he claims Rav would say this doesn't make sense. So we have two possible answers. Either Hadran Abaye me'ahi, he changed his mind about saying modeh Rav, and he doesn't believe that anymore. Maybe we had a mistake about who said it, and it was Rav Papa, it wasn't Abaye. One of the statements was said by Rav Papa and not Abaye. Okay, bit of a long daf, or quite a long daf. Let's summarize very quickly. We started with that sixth answer to why they didn't bring a case in creature of Shevuah. It was a Shevuah that I won't eat, also dates and also chelev, and maybe that proves something, but no, it doesn't prove anything. Then we had a list of all the possible Shevuot bitois in the Mishnah. We went to the differences between neder and Shevuot, which one's chamor in which situation, all the heftzagav distinctions. Then we had two small things on the Mishnayot about this case of giving the gift, it wasn't stuck, and sleeping, which I said, what about those non-sleeping 3 days? Then we went to this big machlok of Rav and Shmuel, to which we did 3 things about that. Number 1, we tried to say, maybe it's Tanaitic debates. We tried 2 attempts, it didn't work. We brought 2 difficulties on Shmuel, which we resolved. And then we had this whole section about Abai, which in the end, Abai comes around full circle and contradicts himself. And then we resolve that in 2 different ways. And that's all based on the Shevuot HaEdut, and really, what's the purpose of the Shevuot HaEdut if it really is a Shevuot bitui? Is it a Shevuot bitui? Is it a Shevuot bitui? And that we saw the difference between Rabba and Abai. With that, we finish for today. Wishing everyone a good day and a Yom Yerushalayim Sameach.